Hey, this is Steve H. from Ask.Audio, and I'm here with Mark Verbos from Verbos Electronics, one of the coolest Eurorack synth designers there is. So I'm going to let Mark talk to you about his cool new modules.
Hi there. So the two new modules that we're showing at the NAMM show this year are the sequence selector and the random sampling. So the sequence selector is a 5-stage analog sequencer with a gate output and a gate select input on each stage, which allows it to arbitrarily jump from these buttons or from the jacks on the bottom with pulses coming in to any stage. And then it sends out a CV from this slider and a gate that's going to be selected from the switches, as well as initiating this 5-to-1 selector, two 5-to-1 selectors. So using this, it's possible to expand the functions of, for instance, voltage multi-stage to make, in what I have patched up right now, is a sequence that transposes by plugging in the CV from the voltage multi-stage into the transpose input here. It's blending that CV together with the CVs from the sliders on here. But it is also possible to use the selectors to, for instance, chain the top row of the multi-stage with the bottom row to make one 16 up to 16 stage sequence, or as many as 5 separate multi-stages that as it goes across selects which one is active in that moment. And right now we're using stage 1 from this one to advance this to go forward and then repeating, but also it would be possible to manually select which section is active, which allows for some variations like during chord progressions in a song or key change, whatever. And
you can turn those stages, take those stages in and out of the sequence with gates, if I'm understanding
right? If you want to select which one is active, you can send it into these jacks or use the buttons to do it manually, or advance it along like a traditional sequencer. Or there's also an analog select input which allows a control voltage to pick which stage is active. Similar to the Buka sequencers or something like that. The second one is the random sampling, which is, pull some of this out. The random sampling is a riff, of course, on the source of uncertainty stuff that Buka did in the 70s.
Absolutely.
And
I'm a big fan of random.
Some of these ideas tweaked a little bit. So we have two fluctuating random sections that have a CV out that's just a varying 0 to 10 volt control voltage going all over under the speed controlled by this rate control, and also an external CV. And
they're completely independent of each other?
They're completely independent of each other. Right now, this prototype version, they only go about to the maximum speed that the Buklas do, but these will, in the production version, go well up into the audio range, so then you'll be able to use it for sweeping the noise spectrum and the sounds that you might expect from like video game noise generators, these whatever. Each of these also has a gate output which is correlated in the time domain, that how quickly the random flickering of these gates are, but uncorrelated to the CV in level. So it's not that whenever the CV goes above a certain point, it's a gate.
It's really about a change.
Totally unrelated, just that they share the same rate control. Yeah. So those are useful for triggering notes that envelope generators at arbitrary non-patterns to create that sort of West Coast whatever kind of thing. The quantized randoms section is derived from part of the Buka 266 source of uncertainty, but this is a bit different. It's sampling a 6-bit digital word and giving you 2 variations of the sets of output of what voltage how many steps there are in the range. So with all 6 bits of that with the quantization control all the way up, 64 different voltage possibilities on the 2 to the n, and 7 possibilities on n+1, and then voltage control of how many bits are active all the way down to just 2. But what makes this different than the Buchla implementation is that was a pseudo-random sequence generator that looped every 128 steps, and this is absolutely random and arbitrary. So you're controlling how many options you have on your possible output voltages, but you're not actually ever going to experience a repeated pattern of outputs.
Yeah, I always got really bored when that 257th step came around.
Yeah, exactly. Then just noise source of just white and pink. And
in the Buchla tradition.
Yeah, and well, I think he would write high and low. Metallic is the mix of square waves that is typical in the cymbal circuits from old drum machines like the TR-808 or the 606, that they just have a cluster of detuned oscillators to make the metallic noise. So that's that. And then a 4-stage analog shift register that is a bank of sample and holds. The analog shift register was first done by a Japanese gentleman who is known as Fortune, who worked at CalArts in the 70s, and he created for the Buchla that they had in the B305, where Subotnick and Barry Schrader was working there at the time, and he came up with this concept, and it is a bank of sample and holds that pass down. When a trigger comes in, the CV coming in is sampled on the first sample and hold, and then the second sample and hold shows you what one step ago was on the first one, and so on down the line.
Bucket brigade kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly, but what we've done here is offer patch points to pull any one of those individual sample and holds out of the group and use it separately, so that it's not all dedicated to this single concept of the analog shift register, but can be used for whatever purpose. If you want to use 4 sample and holds to sample random voltages and use those stored outputs for various values,
cool.
You can if you want
to try that. That sounds like fun.
And because the logic that creates an analog shift register is that the last sample and hold in the chain is triggered first, and then slightly after it the third one, and then slightly after it the second one, that in the microseconds delay, but a small amount of delay, means that they're not all triggered at the same time. So even if you would send the same varying random voltage into all of them, if you would use the master trigger, you would get a selection of randoms, so it's usable.
That's very cool. So tell me, Mark, what got you into like West Coast stuff, being an East Coast guy?
Well, I live in New York, but I grew up in Wisconsin in the Midwest, and as I got into synthesizers in the beginning, I got directly into Buchla stuff because really my mentor in this music electronics thing, this guy named Grant Richter, was the guy who fixed old Buchla gear in the 80s and 90s, and he gave me the opportunity to use his Buchla 200 and Isaac Easel and whatever, and then also when something came through that he was fixing for someone else, he opened it up right in front of me, and we talked about what was going wrong and how to fix it, and
that is so cool.
The schematics. So as time went on, he didn't want to do that so much anymore. He essentially passed the torch to me, so I became the Buchla tech. And a few years after that, then I decided to start this line. So these are heavily influenced by the ideas that came from Buchla, but they're not clones of the circuits. They're more like modern adaptations of those ideas.
And it's obvious that you're inspired by Buchla, but you've taken it even further, which is really great.
Thank you.
Beautiful stuff.
Thank you.